Hello, my name is Aubrey, and I am a senior studying environment and sustainability with a concentration in wildlife conservation and education. I'm here to talk today about my summer experience, which I can joyfully summarize as a stressful summer. Now, I'd like to clarify, while this was a very stressful experience, I was not the one who was stressed. I actually had the time of my life. I spent every morning getting up at 5:45 a.m. so that I could get to work at 6:30. And this is because I was conducting research on stress in birds. Specifically, I was studying the bodily response to stress in wild tree swallows. This is the field of study known as stress physiology, and I conducted this research in Dr. Marian Vitusik's lab in the Cornell Ecology and Evolutionary Biology department. Here's a close-up picture of our beautiful study subjects. Tree swallows are a iridescent blue-green color as adults, and they are small songbirds, about 20 grams. They feed on insects in the air, and every summer they come up to New York to nest. Typically they nest in cavities. So in nature, these are usually tree cavities, but they also love nesting in artificial nest boxes. And so across our field sites, we set up a ton of nest boxes, and every summer they come to nest in them. And so this makes them a very easy and accessible study subject. So we conducted research across 4 different study sites. This is a picture of one of them with all the nest boxes as the data points. And we study about 200 breeding pairs of tree swallows every summer. They come back year after year because once they find a good site, they like to stick to it. So for the majority of my presentation, I'm going to be talking about the overarching research in the Vitusik lab that I contributed to. And so the study that I helped work on is a long-term 5-year study. And while the Vitusik lab broadly focuses on stress physiology, over the past couple of years, we've really focused on looking at how climate change as a stressor is influencing our tree swallows. And so to do this, we simulated climate change by putting ice packs in ice attics that we installed above their nest boxes. So in this image here, you can see the nest box on the bottom. That is the ice attic that we have installed on top, and those are the ice packs inside. Now, you might be thinking, ice packs for climate change? Isn't the world getting warmer, so why would you want to make it cooler? That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Well, it doesn't, if you think about it like that. But when you think about how global warming works, it puts a lot of things in more context. So with global warming and increasing surface temperatures, our winters are getting shorter, and that means that our springs come earlier every year. So that means that our tree swallows come earlier every year. And so while they typically started breeding in May, now they're coming in April and as early as late March. And while this might be good for them, sometimes they can get a head start. This also means that they're very, very vulnerable to cold snaps. So this is a picture that I took in June, cold enough for a jacket, a sweater, scarf, and hat. It was 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And cold snaps are these period of 2 to 3 days when temperatures can drop suddenly to 30 to 40 degrees. So since many of you, if not all of you, have experienced an Ithaca spring, you are probably well aware of the instance where it's gradually warming up and we get excited for spring and summer, and then all of a sudden we get pranked and it goes back to 30 degrees. So that's what we're studying. And with climate change, these intense weather events are becoming increasingly common, and they can have huge consequences on our tree swallows' breeding and survival. And so as this becomes increasingly common, our goal is to study how that impacts our tree swallows and how that as a stressor is influencing them. So we simulate the cold snaps using the ice packs, but we also want to simulate the stress response so we understand what exactly is going on in their bodies. And to do that, we manipulate a stress hormone in birds called corticosterone, which I will refer to as CORT. And so to manipulate CORT in a non-invasive manner, what we do is we dissolve the stress hormone in a gel, and we put that gel on a fake egg that we put in each nest. And so during the incubation period, the females will sit on her eggs to incubate them, and she will get the gel from the fake egg on her body, and she will absorb the hormone in that way. So this way we're able to replicate that stress response in a non-invasive manner. And this will help us to understand how exactly those stress hormones might be influencing her behavior and other aspects of her life. And so this is a long-term study, as I mentioned, that's spanning over the course of 5 years. And so the basic timeline and outline of our experiment is that during the summer, we do this exposure where we simulate the cold snap, we simulate the CORT dosing, so they have that stressor, and we study how exactly they do. Once the breeding season's over, they fly down to Florida for the winter, and then they come back next summer. And so we repeat this process over and over again so we can see how this affects them both on a short and long-term scale. And so while the study is currently going on, we have a lot of interesting results from our data so far. The first one being that our stress-exposed adults, so the adults that we're exposing to the cold snap and to the quart dosing, tend to feed their chicks a lot less frequently than the normal adults. So this causes their chicks to be a lot smaller, a lot more underdeveloped, so they weigh less, they have smaller wings. But we noticed that they have the same number of chicks leaving the nest successfully as the regular adults. And so this was pretty interesting and something that we're still looking into more to understand why exactly that's happening. Something that we also noticed is that the adults that we treated 1 year that would come back the next year end up being way more resilient to the treatment the following year. And so even though they're still being exposed to the cold snap and the quart dosing, we see that they're really resilient in terms of stress hormones. So when we do measure those stress levels in their bodies, we see that during those challenges, their stress hormones shoot way up, but once it's over, they're able to return to baseline normal state really quickly. So they have this really impressive flexibility of stress hormones. Now, why exactly does this research matter? We're studying these little tiny songbirds, and so how can that apply to us, or why is it so important to research? Well, researching stress physiology in tree swallows is really helpful for understanding three big things. It's helpful for understanding stress in general, for understanding climate change impacts and conservation implications, and also for understanding ourselves. So first I'm going to talk about how researching stress helps us understand the concept overall, because it's a really big concept. Stress is influenced by a lot of different factors, and it also plays out in a lot of different aspects of our lives. In our tree swallow research, we see how it influences their diet, their foraging, their behavior, and other types of other aspects of their lives. And so trying to understand and explain all of that can feel a little bit like this. It's a lot. There's a lot going on. And so one big thing about stress is that even though it can look very different between individuals or species, overall the general stress response is very similar across vertebrates. So as different as we are from these tiny tree swallows, since we're also vertebrates, we also experience stress in one way or another. And so the Vitusic Lab's research on stress physiology is helpful for understanding how that stress response works. They also have, our research also has important climate change implications and conservation implications. So with climate change, our environment is becoming increasingly unpredictable. And this can be really stressful for animals who aren't used to experiencing cold snaps. And tree swallows are also among one of the many species that are declining due to a lot of human activities, climate change being one of them. And so understanding climate change impacts and how that is affecting the species is important to understand how we can effectively protect them before they're gone. Climate change, our research is also really important to the military, apparently. In the past couple of years, the Vitusic Lab has received funding from the Department of Defense. Because even though we are researching tree swallows, the military is really interested in seeing how our research can be applied to national security and how stress can apply not just to birds, but also to ourselves. That leads me to this other point, in understanding stress in ourselves. As I said, the vertebrate stress response is highly conserved, so it's very similar across organisms. And so while we are studying birds, learning about stress and how that influences our bodies and our lives, both on a short and long-term scale, can be helpful for understanding how it affects us and how we can deal with that. That was me on a 10-hour-long day when I was processing 100 blood samples. So I think for me, the biggest thing what is most important to me about the Vitusic Lab research is how much I've learned from studying and observing these birds over the past 2 years. They are beautiful animals and also extremely resilient, and they've taught me a lot about perseverance in the face of adversity. And so the next time that you're going through a tough time or a stressful experience, remember that you're not alone, because all organisms experience stress in one way or another. And if these small, tiny birds can teach us about huge concepts like stress and climate change, and if they have the strength to get up and face their challenges head on, then you can too. Thank you.